So this is a really hard question. The question was essentially something along the lines of, how can you not know when things aren't real? So this is really hard to explain. I've experienced psychosis, and most of the time I can hear a voice and I see things that aren't real, and I have thoughts that I find it difficult to distinguish if they're like realistic or not. However, I'm a little bit unusual in that I've got pretty much got insight all the time. Now, insight basically means that if you give me a little bit of time, I will be able to figure out the thing's not real. However, a lot of people don't have this, and I've experienced brief moments where I don't have this. And it's very hard to explain to anyone who's not experienced it. The closest I can think of is think about when you're really tired. I mean, really, really tired. And your brain kind of plays tricks on you. It's a bit like that, but all the time. You will, it's so hard to explain to anyone. I hear a voice, and I hear it a lot of the time. It seems to get worse when I get anxious, but it's there. It's there a lot of the time. I call him Nigel. There's a couple of other voices as well, but he's the main one. And I know he's not real. I'm fully aware he's not real. But when he speaks, I will still look at him because I feel like I'm being rude if I'm not. And when he speaks, and if he says something enough times, over and over and over again, you start to get convinced of it, like you would if anyone told you something over and over again, you'd start to get convinced of it. It's just human nature. So even though I am fairly aware he's not real, sometimes it's like I forget that he's not real. And I have to double check. And I do this through many ways, but it's easiest to have got someone with me and I can do reality check with them. I also see things. What I see varies. Sometimes it's just like, when it's sort of dark and things take on other forms. Like you'll have a dressing gown and you'll think it's a person, hung up and you'll think it's a person because it's dark, and you just get into that sort of paranoid state of mind. I get sort of that sort of thing quite a lot, but all during the day as well. So I have to do a lot of double takes or triple takes sometimes because something will look like something else. Or I'll see movement out of the corner of my eye and there's no one there, that sort of thing. But I also see spiders, and I see spiders a lot. But the thing about the spiders is, spiders are real. And the spiders I see, yes, they're a bit bigger than what you'd normally find in Britain, but it's not like they're, I don't know, glowing or bright green or speaking or doing anything really that's not within the realms of reality. They're just bigger. And people are like, well, if it's bigger, then surely it's not something because it's in Britain. You can work that out. And it's like, yes, I can work that out, but it takes a little bit of time. I will react, and then I'll think, hang on a second, that probably wasn't real. Sometimes I know they're not real because they're not acting quite like spiders normally act, but still, it takes a little bit of time. And quite often this results in me staring at what everyone else thinks is nothing because I'm just trying to figure it out. And to everyone else, this probably looks really strange. But I've got to figure these things out because I don't just know intrinsically what is and isn't real. I have to work it out, which, if I'm perfectly honest, is an exhausting state of affairs. I also sometimes have thoughts that, it's not even thoughts, it's more like a knowledge. It's like I've got a knowledge that I have no right of having. So, for example, when I was a teenager, I was completely and utterly convinced that through skin-to-skin touch with any other person, I would know how they were going to die. I would just know. And that was quite scary. It felt like almost a burden. It felt like I had this power and this responsibility almost by having this knowledge that I shouldn't have. I wasn't even very quiet about it. I did mention it to quite a few people. No one flagged it up as being a bit strange, which in hindsight, a little bit weird. Maybe it's just I was a bit of a strange kid anyway, I don't know. But ever since then, I've just basically stopped touching people. I don't do handshakes, I don't do hugs. And people have assumed that's because I'm autistic, and I've just allowed them to assume that. And I'll admit there's a little bit of that. I'm not a great fan sensory-wise of skin-to-skin contact. But the main reason is because I'm scared that power might come back. And I'm like 70% sure that power was a delusion and it's not real. But because there's that tiny chance that maybe it was, I'm still scared of it. And I know most people go, it's definitely not real, 100% sure not real. But when you've been convinced it was for so long, it is very difficult to shake that feeling. I suppose you think about it like this, right? These beliefs and perceptions, these unusual experiences are coming from my brain, okay? You use your brain to think, you use your brain to know what is and isn't real. So how am I meant to think my way out of these things when it's coming from my own brain? Our experience of the world comes completely from our sensory input. And it turns out my sensory input is not what you'd call reliable. So my experience of the world is obviously going to be a little bit different because my senses make stuff up, as it turns out. So it's very difficult to know. I mean, the whole seeing is believing thing, that doesn't really work for me. Seeing, hearing, feeling, none of those things are believing. I've got to logic my way and rationalize my way into knowing what is and isn't real. And so, yeah, I can't just look at something and go, yeah, that's real. There's no way of knowing, unless other people can also see it, in which case, yeah, it probably is. But I can't have someone with me at all times to reality check. So it becomes a very complicated situation of me having to try to figure out things constantly. And yeah, and I'm not explaining this very well at all. I do not know how to explain this properly, in part because I can't remember a time when I didn't have these experiences, so I don't know how to explain what it is to feel them because I don't have a reference point of not feeling them. I mean, I probably didn't as a kid, I don't remember. So yeah, it's really hard to explain. I hope I've done a half decent job, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer this question. It's just simply a case of you just don't. We're so used to believing what we see and what we hear that you just do it instinctively. And until you have a reason to know to question it, you don't question it, basically. And when you're in a full-blown psychotic episode, you just don't have the capability to question it. It affects so many aspects of your being and of your cognition. In some cases, it even affects your ability to speak. I mean, I know that when I start slipping, I will start forgetting words and using the wrong words. And the way my housemate puts it is, it sounds like something gone through Google Translate a couple of times. All the words are just slightly wrong. So yeah, when you're in a full-blown psychotic episode, you don't have the capability to question things. When you're at the level I'm at, where you technically have insight, you still have to think about it. You still have to. You can't just know. I mean, some people can just essentially, they've just learned what their things are and they just can ignore them. I'm not at that point yet. But yeah, it's just, you just don't know and you have to question everything. It's not just as simple as going, yeah, that's real. Yeah, that's not. Because your senses are telling you they're real. And your brain is interpreting those senses as those things being real. So you have to question your own brain. And that's not a natural thing to do. So yeah, I hope that at least slightly answered the question.